Hi and welcome back. So in the previous lectures we built out our CoreData API. Eventually we're going to want to build a UI to consume it and then start to actually manage our models within it. And we could go ahead and build that UI now and run it alongside our API on our development machine, which is sometimes something that you might want to do. However, given that the nature of our platform is that it's going to be built from individual components, and if you were working in a bigger team, for example, then you might have separate teams with one team that does UI developers and a separate team that does the back end. In these cases, you want to be able to deploy your different components independently. And so in this lecture, we're going to deploy our API straight into a hosted environment, in this case Azure, and so that in the next lectures we can then start to build the UI that will consume it from Azure. Now normally you would have different environments, be it subscriptions or accounts if you're using AWS, that would be for development, staging, pre-production and production. So what we're going to do now is we're going to simulate as though we were building it in a development environment. We're going to need to create a number of resources. We're going to need a resource group, a service plan, the actual API app itself, and then a SQL Azure server and database. We could do all this within Visual Studio itself, but personally I like to do things by hand first within the portal and then deploy to it from the Visual Studio. You'll need to log on to the portal which is in Azure, which is portal.azure.com. If you don't have an account already, go ahead and sign up for one. It's completely free, and in fact you get around $150 for your first 30 days that you can use for free. After your first 30 days, you actually then get a number of other services that are free for your first year and some services that are free forever, depending on what usage tier you're using. So let's go ahead. In our Azure portal, the first thing I'm going to do is create a resource group. So I'm going to go ahead and click Create a Resource. And we want a resource group. So let's go ahead and create that. So we'll choose our subscription. Then we need to give our resource group a name. I like to use naming standards when I create objects in Azure, so I always prefix resource groups with RSG, and then we're going to call this Agility. Then we'll set what region you want it to go to. I'm going to go to UK South, but you can use whatever region you want. And then we'll click Review and Create. And then finally Create. Once that's created, let's go and create another resource, and this time we'll create our API app. So let's do a search for API app and click Create. Again, let's give it a name. So I'm going to call this API-Agility. Let's see if that's available. Yes, it is. So it's going to ask for the resource group. I'm going to tell it to use an existing resource group and choose the one I created earlier. We're also going to need an app service plan. If you've not got one already, it'll try to generate one for you. What we need to do is click Create New, give it a name. So again, I shall call this SP for service plan, and we'll call it Agility Free because I'm going to use a free tier. Again, I'm going to use the UK South, and I'm going to select the pricing tier. I'm going to go to Dev Test up here, and I'm going to go for the F1, which is free. So click Apply, and then OK here. So that creates my service plan, and it's free. Application Insights, I'm going to turn this off for now, just for this demonstration purposes. Usually application insights are quite useful to get metrics out of your application, but you can leave that on. You'll just consume an amount of storage which you might get billed for if you go over a certain tier for that storage. So once that's done, we'll go ahead and click Create. While that's deploying, the final thing I need to create is a SQL server. Now I could go and create the SQL server, then the database. Okay, so let's go to SQL servers. Now I've got that in my favourites. If it's not there already, you can go to all services. We'll want databases. Then we want SQL databases, and what you do, if you click that star, it will make it appear in your favourites. So we're in here. So in the SQL service, I'm going to click add. This is just to make it quicker and easier to add the object that I want, rather than searching through it by clicking when I click the create resource. So again, let's give it a name. So I'm going to prefix with SQL because it's SQL Server. Again, I sometimes like to use, for example, dev and things just so that we know what environment we're in. And I'm going to again call this agility. Let's see if that's free. Yes, it is. We need to set a username. So this is going to be the administrator username, and you need to set a complex password. Again, subscription. Again, we'll select the agility resource group, and again we'll select the location as UK South. We're not going to want the advanced data security. We want to allow Azure services to access the server, and then click create. So once you get a notification saying that deployment has succeeded, we might need to hit refresh here to see our new SQL server. Then we can go into it. And so now we want to create a new database. So I'm going to call this DB dev agility. I'm going to call this agility core because we might have other databases later on, but we can do them under the same SQL server. We're going to select blank database as the source. By default, it's picked up the server that we've created it under. We don't want to use Elastic Pool. What I do want to do is change the pricing tier because by default it will put it to a standard pricing, and what I want to do is change that to a basic and do the minimum, which is 2 GB and 5 DTUs. And we can see here that's going to cost me £4.64 a month. So I'll click apply on there. I'm going to keep the collation the same, and I'm going to click OK, and that will go and start creating our actual database. So we do need to wait for that to finish because we need to get some information from it in a second. So again, once we're notified that that's being completed, we can go into our SQL databases and we can see our database here. So there's two things I'm going to do first. Go back to the overview. So we're still on the SQL server here, and I want to click show firewall settings. Now what I want to do, I want to be able to connect to my SQL server through Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio running on my PC. Now this is going to work because I'm on a personal network that's got its own IP address and I control the firewalls. If you're working from offices, this might not work because if you've got a corporate firewall, the chances are they're going to block SQL. But what I want to do now is add my client IP and click save. I'm then going to go back to overview. Then I will look at my databases here, SQL databases. I will select my database I've just created, and I want to click this show database connection strings. So this is going to come up with a sample connection string that you're going to need, but notice the username and password are blanked out. So I'm just going to copy that by clicking that there to copy it to the keyboard. Then what I'm going to do within my SQL server, I'm going to say connect database engine. I'm going to change the authentication to SQL Server authentication. And then what I want to just do is run Notepad to copy my string into here. And the first thing we want is the SQL server. Let's copy that. So that's the server name. The username and password is the one we created when we created our SQL server itself. I'm going to tell it to remember the password, and then I'm going to click connect. Okay, so we can see now here we've connected to our Azure SQL database server, and we can see that we've got one database in there and it hasn't got any tables or anything like that. But the point is, we've spun everything up now in Azure and we're ready to actually go ahead and deploy to it.